Man, I love Fridays. Friday's the best day of the week. I mean, Friday's the best day of the week for everybody, I think. But for me in particular, we all love Fridays for different reasons, right? Friday, TGIF and all that stuff. Ladies and gentlemen, the weekend. Yeah, we all like Fridays for a lot of reasons. I like Fridays because it's the day we do the Morning Pitt Mailbag. It's my favorite day of the week on these videos here. It's the favorite day of the week where we take questions from the message boards at Panther-Lair.com and answer as many as we can here during our 20 minutes or so that we dedicate to the Morning Pitt Mailbag here on a Friday. We got great questions this week, questions about NIL usage, questions about basketball recruiting, questions about recruiting territories, all kinds of stuff. I'm looking forward to it. Let's jump into it. The Morning Pitt Mailbag right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Yeah, welcome to the Friday edition of the Morning Pitt here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. It's our mailbag edition that we do every Friday. Of course, you know the deal, as we always say. Like this video and subscribe. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. That way you don't miss any of our Pitt video content. We have our daily Morning Pitt videos that we do like this one, Monday through Friday, every day of the week, a little bit of Pitt sports talk to get your day started. Our weekly live show that we do every Wednesday night. Me and Jim Hammett get together for an hour to talk Pitt sports with you at 8 o'clock every Wednesday. It's right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. We have our live post-game shows after every road basketball game. We'll be live after the Boston College game tomorrow night, so that'll be fun. Probably about 10 or 15 minutes after the game ends. Maybe sooner, depending on how quickly I can get my stuff together. We'll be live right here for an hour of talk about the game, what you thought, what I thought. We'll have a little back and forth because that's the great thing about the live streams. You can go in the chat section and post your comments and questions. We can have a little interaction. It's like a little talk show. It's good times. And it's all right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Of course, you know the website too, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com, the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet, football, basketball, and recruiting. You can find it all at Panther-Lair.com and message boards to interact with hundreds and thousands of other Pitt fans. All day, every day, Pitt fans are hanging out at Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. So check out that website, like and subscribe. And let's jump into the questions. The questions we take every week on the premium message board, the Between Fifth and Forbes message board at Panther-Lair.com. And our first question, it's actually our first two questions. I'm going to take these. These guys asked these questions about a half hour apart, and they're kind of overlapped. So let's start with Smedges, longtime friend of the mailbag, regular contributor. We appreciate him for sure. Says, with all the changes in the sport, Pitt staff, and communication technologies, and the ACC footprint now including California and Texas, do you see Pitt recruiting, offering, and signing California and or Texas recruits every cycle now? And then Ski77 asks another question about a half hour later, says, with Pitt's struggles to recruit in Pennsylvania and Ohio and the increase of recruits from Florida, Georgia, and the Tidewater area in Virginia, should they have more of a southern strategy to include scheduling opponents from these areas? These are the fertile recruiting grounds. This could also help with branding Pitt as more of a national brand and not just a northern or midwestern team, and get them on the radar of recruits from these areas. Two questions, different kind of asking different things, but very much in the same vein. I mean, obviously talking about recruiting territories, the geography of recruiting, how Pitt is approaching the geography of recruiting, how Pitt should approach the geography of recruiting. And in Ski 77's question, should Pitt schedule games with an eye toward geographic recruiting areas? And I think there's a lot of interesting topics sort of tied up in those. I think sometimes, to a certain extent, we make too much of schedule a series with this team, and then you're going to be able to recruit in that area. I don't think it always. I think it can help a little bit with your visibility. I think it can help a little bit to have Pitts coming to town, and get a little bit of recognition that way. I think it can help a little bit with, well, hey, come and play with us. You're going to play down here every other year. You know what I mean? When they played USF or they play Miami, come to Pitt. You'll be able to, your family will get to see you without having to travel to Pittsburgh every year. You're going to play at least a couple games in front of them. And I think that resonates a little bit. I think that you can have some success in that regard. But I don't think it's quite as strong and powerful and impactful as we sometimes make it out to be. I think when Pitt developed its success in recruiting South Florida, it was partially because they were playing Miami every year, and a game in Miami every other year back in the early 2000s before the Big East broke up. And then again, once Pitt joined the ACC and got into the Coastal Division and faced Miami every year and went to Coral Gables every other year. There was some impact from that, but there was far more impact from the efforts of guys like Charlie Partridge. There was a concerted effort to recruit those areas. Connections were built, contacts were made, relationships were developed. And that's what ultimately helped you find the guys that you could get. You know what I mean? You could find those overlooked guys, those underrated guys, the diamonds in the rough, because there's so many athletes there. There's so many good players there, and you could ultimately find them and then use those connections to get those guys. That's why they were able to recruit well down there, more than, well, we're here every other year. Should they dive into California and Texas, because now they've got Cal, Stanford, and SMU on the schedule? Personally, I'd probably be mindful of how much resources I'm putting into recruiting those areas. I just think, and I know I just laid out the way that Pitt sort of cracked into Florida and South Florida in particular, and the Miami area in particular. And you could try to do something like that. Pick some particular, specific hotbeds of talent, not just where the top 5-star guys are coming from in Texas and California, but where you do your research and find where the most Power 5 players overall are coming from in Texas and coming from in California, because it's not just where the 5-stars are. It's where the really productive, successful 3-stars are. Where, what area in Texas or what areas in Texas produce the most 3-stars who go on to be all-conference players. You can find that stuff. You know what I mean? You could do the research and you could track it down and you could identify on a map. You could find geographic hotspots that are producing the kind of talent that Pitt is likely to sign. Pitt's not going to go to Texas and California and start getting 5-stars. They're probably not going to get very many 4-stars, if any. But what they can do, and where there may be an opportunity if you've got contacts and connections in these areas, if you're not just building exclusively from the ground up, and it feels like they might be to some extent, but if you've got connections and contacts in these areas, what you want to be looking for is the 2-stars and the 3-stars who are getting overlooked. The guys who don't have offers from Texas or Texas A&M. The guys who, maybe don't even have offers from SMU, or TCU. But the guys who are, probably already looking at going out of state, and you provide an ACC, a Power 5 conference, or Power 4, or whatever we're calling it now, opportunity for those guys that you think maybe can play better than their recruitment has, indicated. And so I think you research those areas. You find where those guys are coming. California's too big of a state. Texas is too big of a state. You can't just try to recruit Texas. You can't just try to recruit California. What you can do, though, is identify 2 or 3 or 4 areas where where they're producing players, guys who come out are 2 and 3 stars. They may have only a few Power 5 offers, but they're turning into all-conference players. Where are those guys? Where's the biggest preponderance, the greatest population of Power 5 players coming from in the state? Pick 2 or 3 of those areas and really work. Now, it means investing resources. It means spending a lot of time there. It means going there every week in the spring. Because after spring camp ends, after the spring game, the coaches go out on the road for 6 weeks. The head coach can't. The head coach has to stay home. But all the assistant coaches go out for the evaluation period where they go to the high schools, they watch the players work in person, they hang out with the coaches, they get to know everybody, and they build those connections and relationships. And you're going to need Jacob Bernowski or Randy Bates or whoever you're sending to Texas to go down there and stay down there for like 3 out of those 5 weeks and just hit those 2 or 3 key areas, hit every high school, and really try to establish Pitt as a presence. I don't know if playing SMU is going to establish Pitt as a presence because you're not playing SMU every year. You're not going to play SMU every other year. Like, you're not going to go down there every other year. I think the way it works out, right, you get at least one road game against every ACC opponent in a 4-year cycle, I think. Isn't that how it kind of plays out? So you could sell guys on that. If you're recruiting in the Dallas area or wherever it is, you could say, look, we can get a game. We're going to have a game down here during your 4-year career at Pitt. And who knows, maybe kids don't even think that far ahead these days because they're all either going to the NFL or they're going to transfer. But you might be able to sell on that, but that's not really what's going to land you guys from Texas and California. What's going to land you guys from Texas and California is putting in the time and the effort and being able to dig deep. Like if Israel Polk turns out to be a really good player, or Ty Diefenbach turns out to be a really good player, I'm trying to think from Texas. I mean, they got Che Wabuko, they got Marquand Pope. Pope was medically disqualified. Wabuko hasn't really contributed much yet. But if you go, you find those areas where they're producing those players and you emphasize those areas, then maybe you can get a couple guys each year. But it just becomes a question of how you allocate the resources, and not just in terms of money. Oh, just spend more money. It's also time. Like I said, you have 6 weeks in the spring to go on the road for evaluations. In the fall, you might have one weekend where you've got an off week on the schedule and you can go out on the road then, but otherwise it's pretty much just a couple weeks in December and the month of January that you have to actually go out on the road. So, you have a finite amount of time where you're allowed to recruit on the road. It's a question of how you want to spend that time, how you want to use that time, and how you're going to, where you're going to be. And are you going to get a valuable return on that time investment? So kind of bundling your questions into one there. Like, I could see them trying to get a little bit more out of Texas and California, but I just think they've got to be, they have to be smart about it. I think they have to be not necessarily creative. They just have to be smart, and they have to do their research and be targeted in how they go after guys. 121 Rum says, I know all the discussion for 2025 is around Malik Thomas, but would you call Pitt the leader for Derek Dixon? That's a good question. Dixon, 4-star wing, combo guard, whatever you want to call him, from Gonzaga in Washington, D.C. Definitely a priority for Pitt in the 2025 class. He was most recently here, I think, for the Duke game, which that didn't go so well. But a few days later, Jeff Capel went and saw him in person. And, I think there's a strong relationship there. I think Pitt's in good shape with Derek Dixon. I think they're in good shape with Malik Thomas, too. But there's a long way to go with both of those guys. You've got until when signing day, like in April, I think the spring signing period is. And so you've got, and really, they're not signing in April anyway. What am I talking about? They're in the class of 2025. So they're not signing until the fall or next spring. So you've got a lot of time to work on these guys. You're going to try and get commitments, obviously, but you're going to have a solid, 14 months of recruiting left with these guys at the most. Maybe they commit and they sign early wherever they're going and sign in the fall, but you've got a long road ahead with both guys. I think they're in good shape. They've done a great job with Dixon. They've done a great job with Thomas. They've got a lot of work to do. A lot of ground to cover there. Chad Papp is putting me on the spot here. Says February predictions are always right? Who will finish second in tackles after Donovan McMillan? Who will finish second in sacks after Dayon Hayes? Who will have the most interceptions? What if I just say Solomon DeShields for all three? Bengali Kamara's gone, so I have to find a new outside linebacker to kind of latch onto and proclaim as the next big thing, right? No, but seriously, I think I could see DeShields finishing second on the team in tackles. Maybe, it'll be interesting to see who steps in at the middle linebacker spot. Does Brandon George just automatically take that? Does Solomon DeShields move there? Does a guy like Jordan Bass move to middle linebacker? Or Kyle Lewis? Does Key Thompson come in as a transfer from Ohio? I think DeShields is going to have a really productive year. I could see him finishing second on the team in tackles. I could see him finishing second on the team in sacks, to be quite honest, depending on how they use him. Now, if they're using him in that money linebacker role, playing to the short side of the field, where he's going to probably have a better chance at getting sacks, it's going to probably limit the way he's used in terms of getting interceptions. But so I guess I can't really pick him for all three: tackles, sacks, and interceptions. Although it'd be fun if he did end up second in tackles, You know what I'll predict? Solomon DeShields will be second on the team in tackles, second on the team in sacks, and second on the team in interceptions. You asked who is second in tackles, second in sacks, and leading the team in interceptions. I will predict that DeShields is second in all of those categories. In terms of leading the team in interceptions, I mean, obviously you would look at one of the corners, but you don't really know who's going to be playing. Tamon Lynam coming in from Nebraska, potentially. I wouldn't entirely close the book on them trying to get another transfer over the summer, although then the guy is coming in rather late. Guys like Rylan Gandy, Noah Bigelow, Rashad Battle, Tamarian Crumple. I mean, there's some older corners on this team who are ready for their opportunity. I might go away from the corners, though, and say that the team leader in interceptions will be Javon McIntyre or P.J. O'Brien, one of the safeties. I think this will be a strong safety team, a safety-led defense, which it often is and often has been over the last 10 years. But I think I might lean that direction. Leading tackler is a safety. Leading interceptions is a safety. And then Solomon DeShields is like second in every defensive stat category. So, because, get on the Solomon DeShields hype train. Woo, woo! Here it comes. A.S. Daniels says, are there a couple examples of replacing a department with a school like Western Carolina's staff and it working out well and quick? O.H. Pete says, not to step on Chris's toes, but Chip Kelly going from New Hampshire to Oregon as OC is a great example. I don't believe the entire New Hampshire staff went with Chip, though. But he did have great success right out of the gate. Yeah, No, I don't know of any examples like that. I haven't looked up to try and find any examples like that, but no, I don't know any examples like that. There are FCS coordinators who went to an FBS school as a coordinator, even a Power 5 level, like Chip Kelly, like that example, where they had success right off the bat, but bringing in almost an entire FCS staff, which is more or less where Pitt is right now, Bronowski being the exception. I mean, I don't know what the precedent is for that. I've expressed some concerns about it, and I don't know what the precedent is. We just have to see. And I think there are a number of reasons to be a little apprehensive about it. I think there are a number of reasons to be not so apprehensive about it. Look, I mean, I think a good scheme can travel. You know what I mean? I think a good scheme, if you're really good at identifying matchups, about creating matchups, exploiting matchups. If you're really good about getting players in the right position, scheming them open and all of that kind of stuff, I think if you've got that kind of intuition, you've got that kind of knowledge, and you've got that kind of system, then it should travel, right? It should move from one level to the next. But there is a question of talent and personnel and whether you're going to have the right personnel to run it and whether the personnel that you're handpicking to run it is going to be good enough to compete and win in the ACC. And so I think there are a lot of questions, and I don't really have those answers right now. The Pit Boy says, from a recruiting perspective, which of the new football assistants do you think has the most potential to be our next star? I think Bronowski looks like he's going to be good. Jacob Bronowski, the tight ends coach and special teams coordinator. I think Lindsey Lamar will be a really good recruiter. I do. I think J.J. Laster has a good reputation, but I think Lamar has a chance to be a really good recruiter. I think he was around Charlie Strong a lot, and Strong was a good recruiter. He's got experience being an offensive coordinator, and I think he carries a certain air of authority with him from that time he spent as an offensive coordinator. He obviously was around the Steelers in a fellowship position. I think he's young. I think he can relate to players. I think he's going to be pretty good. It'll be interesting to see. We just saw news yesterday of a 4-star running back who's going to be taking an official visit to Pitt. Lindsey Lamar is the main contact there, so that's a good early return, right? But we'll see. I mean, I think he's got a chance to be a really good recruiter. We'll find out what the results are. Let's see. I like this question. I want to answer this question. This will be our last one. Berg B asks, let's play a little bit of NIL GM with a bit of hypothetical on budget and player value. For next season, given the weaknesses of the current team, we're talking basketball here, do you think Pitt is better off spending almost all of their budget on retaining the 3 guards and rolling with their existing front court and banking on Papa Conti and maybe a journeyman forward wing out of the portal? Or do you think they should consider diversifying the roster a bit more and prioritize a proven 4 or 5 in the portal, possibly at the expense of one of the non-Leggett guards? Don't need to name names on who you'd trade, can keep it positional. Me personally, all right, hold on. if I'm taking on a GM role and I'm approaching the Pitt basketball team from a GM perspective and an NIL perspective, allocating resources, and I look at my budget and I can either use that budget to keep all 3 guards here in addition to bringing in Brandon Cummings, or I can use that budget to keep one of the 2 freshman guards and maybe upgrade at like the center position. If it's me, I'm all in on the guards. All in on the guards. And I'll take my chances with Federico, who should come back on a discount. Guillermo, who should come back on a discount. Papa Conte, who, should be ready to play next year after a knee injury cost him this season. You got to have those guards, though. I could be completely wrong about this. Maybe Jeff Capel would say you're an idiot. But to me, your best chance for success next year is those guards. Because you're going to have to replace Blake Hinson's production already. You're going to have to find a way to get those points that Blake Hinson. I mean, where is this team this year without Blake Hinson? And you take that forward to next year. If next year you don't have Blake Hinson and you don't have Bub Carrington, or you don't have Blake Hinson and you don't have Jalen Lowe, like, where's the scoring coming from? It'll be the other guard that you kept and Ishmael Leggett, and maybe you get a little bit more scoring out of the post. But if this team's going to be good next year, it's going to be because Leggett and Lowe and Carrington, and not necessarily in that order, are awesome. If this team's going to be good next year, if they're going to get to the NCAA tournament next season, it's going to be because Carrington and Lowe and Leggett lead them there. And so if it's me, like, I'll ride with Conti and Federico and Diaz-Graham, and I'll see what I can find out there. You look around, you try and find what you can, maybe you can get at a good price, or somebody who's maybe been overlooked, or a late portal entry or something like that. But the number one priority to me is keeping those guards. You absolutely have to, and I don't think it's going to be easy, and it might break the budget, but you have to keep them. I think they are essential. It's a good thing I'm not negotiating for Pitt or on Pitt's behalf, because I'm giving up a real position of weakness here by being as desperate about this as I am. But I think you absolutely have to have Carrington and Lowe back next year. That's crucial to this program taking a step forward in 2024-25 season, whatever it is. So that's what I would do if I was a GM. But if I was a GM, I also wouldn't sit here and yell it from the mountaintops about how much I need to keep Lowe and Carrington. I'd probably try and play it a little more coy. But no, I think they're crucial. I think those guys have to be back. I think if you're going to win next year, you're going to win because of those guys and with those guys. And it's going to be a whole lot harder even if you just lose one of them. So that's my thought. But that's a great question, and I definitely would like to hear other people's thoughts on it as well, because to me, it's a no-brainer. You keep the guards if you can. You do everything you can to keep the guards. And figure out the front court later. Maybe to other people, it's a no-brainer that you try and get a. I guess the last thing I would say is if you're, if you keep one of the freshman guards, and then you go to try to get a big-time big man, I don't know if you're going to get what you really need. Like, I don't know if that would elevate the team as much as having Lowe and Carrington back for another year, plus Leggett. I think that having those guards elevates the team more than probably the level of big man you're going to be able to get. Would be my thought. But, we'll see what happens. It's going to be an interesting offseason. Fortunately, there's games before that happens, though. At least 4 more games, and potentially probably more. They've got the 3 regular season games starting tomorrow night at Boston College, and then the ACC tournament, and then whatever comes after that. So whatever it is, we will be talking about it right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. That way you don't miss any of our Pitt video content. Certainly don't want to miss the live post-game show tomorrow night. After the Pitt Boston College game ends, we will be live right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So make sure you tune in, join the conversation with your comments and questions. We'll have a good back and forth. It'll be enjoyable. And then, of course, check out the website, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. Thanks so much for tuning in today. I appreciate it. Hope you've had a great week. Appreciate you watching the videos all week. We will talk to you tomorrow night for the live post-game show, and then we'll be back on Monday morning for the Morning Pit right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.